Are we started?
We can start now.
Okay. So, I'm in Grisha's studio, and it's quite odd because I don't know. I don't think I normally stay in people's. I'm not very normally in other writers' studios. It feels like a very private thing. But it's also quite a nice thing because I think one of the things I like about Grisha is that he's cosmopolitan, that he's this person who speaks lots of languages, that he doesn't he's not rooted in just one place, so that this feels like, this place here in Tuscany feels like this special place that's kind of not really anywhere. And I think I like this especially because the thing I'm trying to do at the moment is I'm trying to finish a book which is made up of, on the one hand, stories, but which are translations of very famous stories by European novelists. Sometimes translations from languages I don't speak, but I'm not really worried about that at the moment. And the other part of the book is going to be these essays about writers and translation and travel, and so therefore it feels very right that Grisha is in some way kind of part of this. And so what I wanted to do is show you the chaos of my notebook about this book, because it's quite funny. And one of the things that I think is odd about writers' notebooks is, well, my notebooks, is that often I can't really understand what I meant, even maybe 2 or 3 days later. So, for instance, these are the notes I was making for an essay that I've been writing in the last few days. And for instance, there's this word surprise, which I've circled as if that's really important to somehow, but now I don't know why I circled that, and I don't know what I meant by surprise. And so what you can see here is what I've been trying to do is I've been doing word counts, because I came here and realized that I'd written far too much stuff. So like, for each essay, I suddenly realized, like, that's just meant to be one essay, but it's like 18,000 words, and that's like a fucking book. So all of these notes are kind of notes I've been doing while I've been here. And then the other thing that I've been trying to do is that with these stories, I've been setting them in different places. So if you take, I don't know, a story by Flaubert, I've decided not to, as a kind of joke, and partly to try and disguise the fact that these are translations, or to show that they're not literal translations, I've been thinking of weird places to set them in that aren't in Europe. So the one I'm doing of Flaubert, I've decided to set in Aleppo. I've never been to Aleppo, and I don't know anyone from Syria, so it's slightly problematic. And so I got a friend recently to send me names of Syrian names that I could use. So I've got these like lists of Nasrallah, Wahid, Adma. So these are names I've got to choose from. And then, for instance, the story I was writing yesterday is a story by Kafka, and I'm setting it in Istanbul. And so what I've been doing yesterday, I was just trying to think of small details that I could use. So I don't know, it's like, I've just got, what's this, school children in white-collared black smocks. And so these are things I'm going to try and use to make it look like I've actually been to Istanbul or Aleppo, whereas in fact, I've not been to either of these places ever, and at the moment it looks highly unlikely I will. I'm here in this place, and this is Grisha's studio, and I think one of the things I do associate him with is this kind of not taking places too seriously. So that, not that you're feeling like you're in exile or that you're feeling kind of sad about this, but that, you know, the way some people feel attached to a place maybe is less important than they at first think. So this whole book, in a sense, I think, if it works, is going to be part of the same spirit. The thing I like is style, and I like the thing that, you know, and that everyone normally believes that a writer's style is something that's really bound up with their language. So if you don't speak the language, then you can't read that writer. Whereas my idea is that that's not true, and that that translation works, that it's perfectly good. But then, that's what I think when I'm feeling quite happy. And then I look at my notebooks and I think this is a nightmare. This is not working. And so You see, for instance, I've just written to myself, theme, the opposite of the preceding one. I don't know what I meant. I don't know what I meant by the preceding one. Or this is not a novel equals theme. And so this is just, it's terrible. But what's funny is that these notes are obviously only important for about 5 minutes. And then once you've used it, then so that all these drafts are kind of irrelevant. But I'm always surprised when writers keep their notebooks, you know, that you see these kind of archives and that people have got these notebooks piled up. And I'm starting to think that all writers should just burn everything, that once they finish whatever book they're doing, then all these notes are mad because they're just going to lead people into crazy ideas. And that there's no real way of telling, even for me, what is an idea here that I want to keep and that I want to kind of go with, and what is an idea that I might have thought for 5 seconds and now just think is insane. There's something quite nice writing not in your own place. And I don't know what it's about. And especially, I don't speak any Italian, and so you're always hearing Italian being spoken. And I think that can be quite good, because it means that your own language, therefore, becomes something that you slightly pay more attention to, I don't know, so that you start noticing it in a way that maybe you don't so much if you're in the place that the language is being spoken. But it can also make it quite scary, because then you're suddenly thinking, Christ, I'm kind of on my own here. And it's something actually I felt when I was trying to finish my first novel as well, is that you get to a certain point in a book where you realise that it's sort of, it's not finished, but you exactly know what's going to happen now, and that kind of you can see the shape that you vaguely thought was there, and that it is going to be there. But then that also means that you suddenly have to take responsibility for this thing, and kind of it's going to be this thing that gets published under your name, and so that's quite an odd feeling as well, where you're used to this idea that it's just this horrible mess that you don't need to take too seriously because it's never going to kind of get published, and then suddenly there you are, and it's
I go. Okay, come.
This is Grisha's typewriter. Shall I go and get the other one?
Yeah.
All right.
Avanti.
It's a typewriter which I got with Beatrice in a market, and and as you can see, it's called the Remington Noiseless Portable, and the only problem with it is it's not noiseless. Because listen to this. Listen, if I was just to write hello, it's not noiseless. You know, it's
This is a friendly little noise.
It's a friendly noise, but it's not noiseless. And but maybe it was noiseless for like the 1920s. And I really like it because it's so beautiful. This was the typewriter of George Orwell, and also of someone of Hemingway as well. Neither of whom are writers I'm very like, but it doesn't matter. Whereas this is Grisha's typewriter, which I think I prefer. I think it's more beautiful, because I like this colour very much.
Sorry, waiting.
It's very beautiful. You see, it's Italian. This is American. That's a problem. And then this is me. So this is quite beautiful. But this is noiseless. You see, I can just do this, and then you can't hear anything. It's just and so my question is really whether I'm going to write better if I write with this. And the thing is, you see, with this, it's very easy just to kind of do. You can write incredibly fast because it's tiny. The keyboard's tiny. Whereas with this, it's like a machine, you know, and it's going to take me hours to write a sentence.
Maybe it's what you want.
So maybe this will be good for me. Maybe kind of I'll become a much better writer if I use this rather than this thing. One of the stories I wrote a few days ago is I didn't write. It's a translation of a story by Diderot called "This Is Not a Story," which I like a lot because it's obviously a story. But Diderot wrote this story, and all it's about sex, and it's saying on the one hand, often very nice men fall in love with awful women, and on the other hand, really nice women fall in love with awful men. That's all that all stories ever say. So he but then he just gives 2 stories. One of them about a nice guy falling in love with a terrible girl, and then the other way round. And what I quite like is that, according to kind of all these editors, these are 2 completely true stories. So they're not. So when he says this isn't a story, he means it. But on the other hand, that's only going to be known to like his best friends. And so once so the interesting thing is that it becomes a story just by the fact that he's written it down, because there's no way that anyone just reading it would know this. But the other thing I like about it is that he tries to kind of make it as true as possible. So he pretends that it's not a story, but he's talking to someone. And so actually I've been stealing slightly. I've been using things that Beatrice says.
Not the only one. Which one?
And you're the narrator. You're not. So you're not either of the bad people. I don't know if I can read those bits. But I set it in Ararat in Armenia, just for some fun, because I setting it in Paris would be boring, which is where it's actually set. And so this story opens like this. In real life, you only tell a story to a person, not to yourself. And normally, this person interrupts. So I've introduced into the story you're about to read, which is not a story, or is a bad story, as if that needed pointing out, a character who can act out the role of the reader, and so I begin. And then he kind of changes thing, and then he pretends that there's this guy that he and a friend of his are just leaving like the theatre or leaving a reading. And so he says, so what did you think? It was nothing, really nothing. But you had a fun evening. It was just pulp fiction. There was no originality. All of these little stories saying the same thing, that boys and girls are immoral animals. But you paid your money like everyone else, because it's more important to be polite than to be clever. Very funny. So he carries on like this.
Cécile.
N'est pas un conte.
Yeah.
And so, but I've done it's my own version. One of the stories is about a girl who falls in love with a guy who's a kind of scholar. He's an academic, and he's working on this massive project on a history of war in the entire world for all time. And he's a very ambitious, slightly nasty young man. But this lovely girl falls in love with him, and because she's very clever, she decides that to help him out, she will learn all these languages. She will. So she learns Hebrew, she learns Greek, she learns Latin, so that she, by night, she does all the work for him. And so he's he's very happy about this because his work's going very well. And although she's exhausted, she gets ill. Her family disown her because they think it's very wrong what she's doing. But she's happy as long as he's in love with her. And then the narrator of this story, who is Beatrice, says that suddenly one morning this girl turns up saying, "I'm dying. I've been abandoned. Everything has gone terribly." And so the Beatrice character says, "Come on, this is kind of crazy. It's fine. I can't believe you'd be so ungrateful. You've given your life for him. Of course he's not going to leave you." And so they take a taxi. Well, indeed, it's a kind of coach, but in my version, it's a taxi. And they go and see this guy who's just working in his dressing gown and doesn't even say hello to the girl. And then just simply after he just writes at his Olivetti. He's sitting there, doesn't kind of do anything, and then finally, after 10 minutes, says, "I'm really sorry about this girl. This is a nightmare." And so the Beatrice character is saying, "Listen, you can't be really leaving her." And he's like, "Yeah, I am." And then there's this very brilliant scene where the girl is completely in tears. She's fainting. She can't. Her life has just disappeared. And there's a very interesting moment where the boy just explains, "What more do you want? I explain myself clearly and precisely. Everything's over between us. I told you I no longer loved you. I said this alone. You seem to want me to say it in front of someone else. So then, I no longer love you. Love is not a feeling I can feel for you anymore, or, if it makes you feel better, for anyone else. But why do you no longer love me? I don't know. I only know that without knowing why, I began to love you, and now I feel it's impossible this feeling should ever return. But what did I do wrong? Nothing. Are you secretly angry about something? Not at all. You've always been the kindest, the most tender, the most honest woman anyone could ever desire, and you're bored of me. It's hard to say and hard to hear, but it's true." And I think this is a brilliant dialogue because it's absolutely true and it's very nasty. And on the one hand, and it's kind of ambiguous because on the one hand, he's telling the truth. He's saying, "I can't help this, of course." And then that you can't keep loving someone just because they've been nice to you. And on the other hand, obviously, all your sympathy is with this girl because she's given her life for him. And And so it's very interesting. So the narrator actually is very anti the guy, you know, so he thinks this is horrible ingratitude. But I think obviously you're meant to sort of leave this story not quite sure of what you're meant to think. That although the narrator is very sure that this guy is just a bastard, everything he says is reasonable. And so that's partly, it's a very moving story because of it. So that the story starts out and you just think this is a kind of jeu d'esprit, this is just fun. And then by the end of it, it's become really quite dark and quite sad. But it needs more work, but it's that. She gets very ill, and a doctor kind of tends to her. And the doctor looks after her, and the doctor is in love with her because she's beautiful and clever and wonderful. And so there's a very sweet scene where the doctor finally over dinner says, listen, I love you, I really love you. And then there's a lovely scene because it's actually the exact opposite, the other way round of the previous scene where she says, listen, I really like you, you're really nice, but, actually if you want me to sleep with you, I'll sleep with you, I can do that, but I can't love you, and that's what you want. And so, and what's so beautiful about this is that it's the inverse of what the boy has told her. That he's saying, I don't love you anymore, and I can't control my feelings. And she's saying the same thing, that she says, obviously, if I were rational, I'd fall in love with you because you're sweet, you've got a good job, you're a good doctor, you love me, but I don't love you. So it's quite sad. But then there's also quite a nice moment when this narrator, who you think has been, you know, really liking her and being really sweet, just suddenly says, so the person he's talking to says, well, what's happening to her now? And the narrator just says, actually, I've no idea really, I lost touch with her. And so that's also quite callous. So there's this. So it's a very kind of nice little story, where every time you think you know what you're meant to think, and that the moral kind of values are quite set, something else happens, and you think, oh, so maybe the narrator's not as nice as they're making out either. And kind of. But partly it's fun because at the moment I haven't done much on this, but. One of the things that Diderot is very good at is writing really colloquially, so that it's like...
Maybe the Remington is good for that. It gives you time.
Yeah,
pause.
Maybe I can kind of... I might do that, actually. Well, I need to get some ink first.